Cheers, brother. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's an honour.
How have you been, Steph?
Good, man. Good. Overall, very good, but there were some shaky moments, as I expressed earlier when I first arrived. I've been back for nearly just a little bit over a week. So I've been back about a week and a half. And when I first landed, it was just, I hadn't been back here for 13 months or so. And it was beautiful being back here. And I jumped into the ocean. I surprised everyone. I didn't tell everyone I was coming back. So that was fun. And I jumped into the ocean that afternoon. I arrived around midday, and that was beautiful. And again, really connected to South Beach. Just as I mentioned earlier, as the days rolled, I felt very disconnected, and that was compounded by a few other experiences. And it was a shock to me because, man, every time I come back here, I mean, I love leaving and I love coming back, and that's been a blessing all my life, most of my life at least. And then being back and not having that deep connection that I once had, it just brought up a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions to the surface of my awareness, and just spent the first few days dealing with that. And there was anger, there was frustration, there was sadness, there was a sense of loss, there was a grieving process, there was also that turned into and transmuted into a deeper recognition of myself, a deeper understanding and revolution of where I'm going and where I've been and where I am currently. And so there was that was reconciled also with just the amazing human connections I have here as well, which, man, I was speaking to a client yesterday who was speaking about gratitude, and I was speaking to them about the process of appreciation. You can intellectualize appreciation, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's really healthy. And you can embody appreciation. You feel it run through your courses through your veins. And, you know, when I think about the amazing heart-based connections I have here, I melt, like I'm really, really deep in appreciation for that. And so getting to there, though, I had to move through some internal muck.
Yeah. What was the muck? Can you be descriptive?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I didn't feel grounded. I didn't feel like I belonged. And so it was not having that belongingness, that sense of belongingness. And honestly, man, to be really descriptive, that was coupled with, I just did a launch for one of my men's programs, and it did not go as anticipated. And the reason why, and there were reasons, let's be real, the reasons, but one of the core reasons why is because it was just a legitimate mistake there was a broken link in the funnel. Just to make it short in the story, essentially men were trying to get into the program that couldn't actually get in because they were directed to a page that it was telling them that the course was over and they couldn't sign up. And that wasn't the case, and there was a broken link there. And so all this effort and this energy and this attention and intention that I've been putting into these programs for so long, these journeys for men, and this particular journey, I'd put more effort than any time before. And so that really compounded the fact of, man, I'm feeling isolated. I'm feeling really alone in this. And that was good because I needed to feel that. I needed to experience that in order to get some clarity on this sense of not belonging here. That was all part of it for me. And so, I mean, the reality is that there are men that have joined up, and it's great. We've already started, and it's already a really beautiful journey and process. And I'm very grateful for that and happy with that. And I had to move through that grieving process of I could have served literally another 30 men. And that's a big deal. Yeah. And so we've tried to recoup that, but unfortunately our analytics only go so far in terms of accuracy there. And so again, that sense of loss was compounding. And then, as you probably know, Instagram, particularly with their algorithm, man, it's really affected me. It's coming back now a little bit actually, but in terms of visibility. And so this was all happening at the same time. I'm thinking, am I not meant to be seen? Am I meant to be in hiding? Is my material or my work not good enough? Okay, do I need to refine the message? Do I need to speak differently but still remain authentic to myself and what I want to give to the world, of course, but also give the world or give the people that I can serve what they actually want? And so there was this flurry, this scattergun of thoughts that were going through me, and just dealing with all of that and not allowing that to consume me, and also allowing that to move through me. So not ignoring it, not suppressing it, which is very, very common for so many of us. We numb and we avoid. And I've done that in the past so much. And so finding that balance and feeling not more alone than I've ever felt before, no way, but feeling quite isolated. And having this, it was an expectation hangover, essentially, as my fiancée Christine Hassler would say, is that I had an expectation of coming back here and feeling deeply rooted into land, but I wasn't, and dealing with that.
They're awesome sharings, man, and there's gems galore for people to reflect upon. That expectation trap. That's a heavy one, you know, that expectation hangover, really well put. And thank you for sharing so vividly and vulnerably, because that's where the teachings are at. You know, of course, they're in your courses and they're in the wisdom and the Dharma teachings and whatnot, but it's in those vulnerable sharings of where we can be really honest and vulnerable, you know. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you, how long did it take for you to work through the kind of expectation hangover?
Yeah, probably about 3 to 5 days. I started, 3 to 5 days. It was tough also communicating with Christine, because she could really feel that. She's very empathetic. And, you know, I sort of slipped into an old pattern as well. And man, honestly, I'm not to come from ego, but I'm fairly adept in how I deal with pain and difficulty and challenge in my life at the moment. And I struggle. There are times when I struggle. And last week was one of those times where I just reverted back to old patterns of shutting out. And I wasn't so much numbing out, but I was shutting out. So I was shutting out people that I cared for, and I shut out Christine. But I was very clear about that. I just said, I'm literally shutting myself down, and I feel I can't connect with you, and I can't really connect with anyone at the moment. And I've just got to deal with this. And she was asking that I leverage the tools that I have to shift it. I didn't want to. The egoic parts of me, the entrenched parts, the old unconscious behaviors that are just entrenched in that habit didn't want to budge. And I was very clear about that. I don't want to budge this anger. I'm fucking angry right now and I don't want to budge it. It's as simple as that. Once I moved through that, I went through some processes, anger release, and through some breath, sound, movement practice where I was able to shift some of that energy somatically, and then get beyond the anger into the sadness and into the loss, and start to identify what parts of that was. And part of that was also letting go of family roots and lineage. And, you know, I was very close to my grandparents, very close to my maternal grandparents, and I looked after them for many years before they passed. And they were born in Italy, but they spent they passed away a few years ago. They spent the last 50, 60 years of their lives here. And so, you know, I walked back into my family home, and I didn't even feel that connection there. That was tough. And so there was a grieving process of another layer of grief around my grandparents, well, they're no longer here. And so there's less and less for me here now, except for that human connection. And accepting that, coming to peace with that. And the moment really I started releasing and then creating spaciousness in my own psyche and my body to come into greater peace with that was the moment I started reconnecting to land, but in a different way. And that for me was liberating and freeing. And now I feel at peace. And this is a really important component of it. My beautiful friend, very good friends, Joe and Vicky, I've known them for like 23 years. And since I was a young teenager, and Joe's a few years older than me, 3 or 4 years old. Vic and Joe are 3 or 4 years older than me. And Joe said, man, don't stay at an Airbnb. Come stay with us. And the moment he said that, it felt good. And I said, you know what? Yeah, I want to do that. And so luckily enough, I was able to get out of my Airbnb. I mean, it cost a bit, but that was irrelevant. And just moved in with Joe. And it just immediately, I got 2 kiddies, 12 and 16. I just immediately felt at home. And that helped, man, being in that nurturing environment, having that support. And I speak to Joe about everything, but it was more of an unspoken support. That was empowering, man. And the reason why I mention that is I think so many of us, we try and do things alone. Like I spent deliberate time in solitude. That was part of what I needed to do to shift and heal and move through and reveal something different. And knowing that I had so many people around me that all I had to do was pick up the phone, that's everything. So many people, men particularly, don't have that. But it's up to us to cultivate that. It's our responsibility. And if that means we have to shift some old stuff, move through some old fears, let go of stubbornness, whatever it may be, in order to forge deeper friendships that are real and authentic, then we've got to take that path.
Totally. And it takes such responsibility and such action to cultivate that in this current time of all of this endless kind of, not false connection, but the connections we form through the social media and whatnot, which it's so highly addictive. And there's that kind of paradox of people being so connected, more connected than ever, yet people feeling really disconnected in physical, nurturing relationships. And it's that beautiful balance we need, which I think in today's day and age, it really takes responsibility and discipline to not only have that solitude, which I think we need, because people so commonly aren't taking any solitude with the phone phenomenon, which I talk about on nearly every podcast because it's so new and challenging and addictive. It's been designed to be addictive, and evidence is showing that. Many people never have moments of solitude. And even 7 to 10 years ago, that solitude would have just naturally happened. Waiting in lines and waiting at the traffic light, just moments of nothing.
Yeah.
Now, in that moment of nothing, people are reaching for the phone and endless connections. We can connect at a heartbeat, yet people are feeling very disconnected. So that we gotta remember that heart to heart, physical, in each other's space, in each other's tears, physical connection. And you're doing that beautifully with all your men's work. I'm keeping an eye on it, and it's really inspiring because, like you said, women are very good at being vulnerable and honest and talking and getting together. It seems more natural. For men, it seems a bit more unnatural, and it's beautiful to see these men's workshops and circles and really deep work coming up more and more. So good work for bringing that into the sphere. Let's talk about this man in concept that really has a lot of oomph to it, the shift from manning up, which we've been told for however long, who knows how long, we've been told to man up, as opposed to this new potential of manning in. Can you please go there and share what that's all about?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And see, I have no problem with the term manning up. I actually feel it's relevant and necessary, and I'll explain, I'll define it. I'll define both man up and man in. The issue with manning up for me is that there's a stigma attached to it that as a byproduct of manning up, we suppress and we avoid and we don't deal with our pain and we don't deal with what we actually want to look at or what we need to look at. And that's the stigma and the byproduct attached to manning up. And so manning up means being resilient and being tough. Being tough means having an ability to move through difficulty. Being resilient is having an ability to recover from difficulty or challenge or an arduous time. Absolutely necessary. Sometimes we need to pull our socks up in the moment and we just have to get through it to survive or even to thrive at a later stage. Sometimes we don't have time to actually deal with the pain and the emotions that are occurring in our world. For example, if you're in a dangerous situation, you're in the forest and you're running away from a bear, for example, you don't really have time to sit there and feel the fear. You can feel the fear later, but you've got to take action on it. So you've got to, technically, quote unquote, man up. That's maybe an extreme example, but we can look at examples in the modern world as well. We can look at maybe being out in public and having an argument with a stranger. You have to make very quick decisions. You can't be there and say, excuse me while I cry if someone's attacking you. It's not really realistic. And so manning up has a place, as an example. The issue is that we continue to man up and we continue to suppress, and becomes a habit and becomes a societal norm where men are simply told that you should not feel, as if we don't have a limbic system. Men, particularly males, are told that you just have to get through pain. Nothing wrong with getting through pain, but there's no afterthought to the pain. There's no critical reflection. There's no contemplation. There's no deeper understanding of what is the pain for me? How can it serve me? How can I work with this pain? Do I need to feel this pain again? What is it teaching me? What is it giving me? How am I behaving in reference to this pain, this suffering, this challenge? there's no deeper reflection. And so manning up becomes this norm that is just get through, bulldozer your way through life without any critical thought. Man, when we look at any ancient culture, most ancient cultures that were astute and had some level of spiritual, emotional, physical, cognitive intelligence would have a praxis, a self-reflective praxis, whether it was through prayer or meditation or simple cognitive contemplation at the end of every day. The ancient Greeks would promote this massively. We miss that in today's society. You know, part of what you said around the phones, that's part of that. We're so connected yet so disconnected. And we get entrenched in these habits that aren't really serving us. So for me, the concept of manning in, which was actually it was a friend of mine, Corinne, said, Steph, you need to do a video on manning in instead of manning up. And then I ran with that. I started giving it more context and flavor and texture and richness and depth and substance. I started going into that. I think, well, okay, for me, manning in is doing the work. It's being aware. For me, manning in is looking at our stuff and saying, okay, I'm going to take ownership of this. I'm going to take responsibility of this. I'm going to look into this. This is too painful. I need a little bit of help with this. I'm going to look at my habits and my patterns in relationships and say, why am I doing the same shit over and over again? I'm getting the same result. It's causing me more pain. I'm suffering more. I'm feeling more fear. I don't have to just keep getting through this. I can reach out for help and I can make some changes. Yes, it may be difficult, but I'm prepared to do that. Manning in is essentially taking responsibility. So once we do that and once we go inward and we become an inwardly evolved man, then we can start looking at, okay, we can look at stoicism. We can say, okay, how do we man up? But you're manning up from a place of greater intelligence and awareness, consciousness of self and actions and one's past and present and where we want to go in the future. That's a very different way to look at manning up. So I say manning in and I say manning up, honestly, to be a little bit and don't man up, to be a little bit controversial because it gets people thinking, okay, what's this idiot saying? You know, what's this person saying? Is it oh, I really agree or no, I completely disagree. Great if you disagree. Let's talk about that. And what is it that you disagree about? And we can open up a dialogue about what this actually means. But for me, the traditional notion of manning up, it's outdated, man. I'm all for being tough. I purposely condition my physical body, my mental, emotion on a daily or regular basis in order to prepare for difficult times. I'm all for moving through pain and difficulty. And let's couple that with a greater awareness of self.
Beautiful. And that video, by the way, is awesome.
Thanks,
bro. Bit of a tearjerker with the music in the background.
Yeah.
It's very emotive.
Bo, my friend Bo in the US, he's on the East Coast, sorry, he did that for me. He's great at video editing. And if anyone's watching, I'm just going to give him a plug because he's just such a heart-based guy. Awesome. If anyone wants any video editing, just go see Bo.
Cool.
You'll see it on that video.
I'll put a link below to the video. It's really great. It's inspiring and very articulate. And you said it all just then, but it is a great video.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all about the balance, huh? Because there's another kind of extreme that seems to be happening, especially in spiritual communities with the rising feminine and the women getting very empowered and many women also falling into the other extreme of maybe taking the masculine too out of balance. Seems to be getting this kind of pendulum effect of a lot of men becoming overly feminine and overly introspective and overly soft, kind of that pendulum shift of really deeply going into the feminine and all of that you spoke of without the balance of then manning up and getting on with it. And I'm hearing that predicament in a lot of relationships. I've heard from quite a few women kind of pretty much, to put it frankly, like complaining that their man is soft, you know? And I don't know if that's from having too many soy products and their testosterone's going down, or maybe taking the spiritual practices that we're speaking of, the introspection and the inquiry and just the softening too far. They've become too soft. And their woman's wanting their man to then man up and have some balls and bring it. So it's an interesting balance. And I find that with myself. Just when I first met Joe, I was very in that feminine space, very in a soft space, had no libido for a couple years at least, which led to a very organic process of becoming celibate for a couple years. It just felt natural, felt
Whilst
good.
you were with Joe?
No, just before.
Before.
Just before. Yeah. And when I first met her, I was still very much in that feminine space, felt neutral at the time, but looking back, it was a very feminine space. And then having this empowered woman come into my life that's very balanced, but very empowered, a lot of that Shakti, rising feminine, empowered energy, I felt it be, again, looking back in retrospect, it was kind of confronting for that part of me that wasn't quite meeting her yet. And thankfully, because of the practice and the ability to just watch it, I could kind of step up and kind of meet her where she was at. But I think it can be very challenging being with an empowered woman if we're not willing to also man up. It seems very interesting, the balance, but the manning in for our times is crucial to go within and get honest. I mean, this heavy armoring and heavy kind of tendency as a man, especially to defend and deny and project. I mean, it's just, obviously it's gotten us somewhere.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah.
It's time to break through that into a deeper, exquisite balance. So yeah, beautifully articulated. And men, dive in. It's time to really face our shit, and we're not the only one. I think if people don't have direct community, it can feel very lonely. Similar to what you, I think, expressed when you first got here, that feeling of kind of loneliness. We need to reach out and have sangha. Like most spiritual practices point out that is the most important thing. Before all the Dharma teachings, before all the introspection, before all that, sangha, so important. Like
feel safe in community. Yeah, feel safe in tribe. Feel safe in resonance of other people. That creates spaciousness and it creates opportunity. You're not going to want to explore your inner self if you can't find food, or if you don't have community that you can rely on, if you don't feel safe in your environment. If your basic needs aren't met, and part of that is social cohesion, if your basic needs aren't met, being introspective is the last thing you want to be thinking about, essentially. And so it becomes imperative, I really agree with you, this concept of Sangha and the community becomes imperative that we seek that and we create that for ourselves in some way, shape or form, whatever that looks like for us. And if we don't, we're going to continue to be lonely and we're going to revert to patterns that are protective, hyper-protective. And part of that is distancing, because it's sometimes easier to be alone than to be hurt by others, especially if we're not in check ourselves and we haven't dealt with our own pain and trauma. And most of us have that. Not all of us, but the vast majority of us have that. I know I personally did for so long. Just unchecked childhood developmental trauma and pain that I didn't think affected me, but it did. It really did. It affected my adult relationships. It affected my belief systems, the way I moved through the world, my models of reality, the way I gave and received love, the way I behave and acted, and all of that. And we all are open to that. We all can be affected by that. And for men, I think it's so important that we find community. We've evolved that way. We've evolved with bands of brothers, where our primary primitive roles were to protect the perimeter, to create shelter, to be physically adept, to be strong in our bodies, and to work in small or larger teams in order to survive and protect the community, but largely because of our physical prowess. And so, over millions of years, humanoids have evolved that way. Now we're sedentary, we're isolated, we live in cubicles, we drive in cubicles, we're on our phones. We lack that constantly or excessively. We lack that human connection and that reliability on another, that deep brethren. That needs to come back. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely coming back. But it takes choice, doesn't it? I mean, it's so easy. I can only imagine working 8+ hours in a cubicle, like you said, driving there, driving back, however long that takes to commute, and then living in a cubicle enclosed in the walls, maybe by yourself. So you're maybe on a computer for however many hours in that cubicle, in your cubicle of a car, into your cubicle of a house. And that, again, I can only imagine, because I haven't been in that position. I can only imagine, and I have real compassion towards those people, kind of, because it would be very, in a weird way, addictive. If that's your familiar routine, you're doing that most of your life, 8+ hours a day. That's most of what you're doing. That'd be a thick fucking trap to get out of. And it's like, take responsibility, have choice, but to really like peel open the veils and make that initial choice and put the fucking phone down, or instead of watching TV at night, go and have a primal workout, or do a yoga class, or go meditate, or do something, jump in the ocean. Yeah. It would take a lot of willpower, a lot of initiative, a lot of balls, and then a lot of self-love. I want to talk a little bit, or maybe a lot, about self-love, because it really feels like a cornerstone, a real potent, necessary foundation for discipline, really, for it to come from self-love, in which we're not being narcissistic and obsessing about ourselves, but it catapults us to make conscious choice. So what do you feel is self-love, and how can that help one make those conscious choices when it's really tough and they'd rather just turn on the fucking television or hop on the phone and just scroll? But to do something that would be tough, it's tough to do something out of our comfort zone. Can you speak to that a bit?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is radical self-acceptance and radical self-compassion. I just released a video on this today, actually this morning, our time, Perth time. So I wonder how many of us, you know, man, I'll just speak for me. I won't even project, although I'm a keen observer of human behavior, and I study the mind and so forth, but I'm not going to project. I'm just going to keep it with me. Like, I wonder how many of my actions are actually just for me. Let me elaborate. And you can apply this to yourself or to the people that you see, and for the listeners watching, or watching. Apply this to yourself. When you're putting makeup on, when you're putting your clothes on, when you're choosing what outfit to wear, when you're thinking about how you want to talk and articulate your message, your thoughts, your ideas, how much of that is really just for you? When you look at your face, how happy are you with your face? Are you happy that you have some wrinkles here, or that you may have I've got a blemish or two here, over there. I don't know where it is, one of the sides. Am I really happy with that? And if I'm not happy with it, why am I not happy with it? Is it because I'm annoyed by it? Is it because I think what others may think of me based on some notion or idea of what it means to be attractive, and then the symbolism and meaning that being attractive has in our social construct and the psychology behind that? I mean, for people watching, I overthink shit. Like, I go deep into thinking stuff, right? So I was thinking about that a week or so ago when I did that video, or 2 weeks ago when I did that video, and I was thinking about, when I look at my body, I'm strong and I'm lean, but could I be leaner? But why do I want to be leaner? What's it for? Or I want a particular vein or a muscle here, or I want my hand to look different, or I want more body hair here or less body hair there, or what? Based on what social construct? Are they really my ideas? Is that really coming from the essence of who I am and who I want to be in the world? Or is it coming from some projection of what I think others think of me, or how others see me? And I guarantee you, man, so many of us get caught in this trap. When we're looking at plastic surgeries, when we're looking at, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with plastic surgeries, wrong or right, that's actually irrelevant. But why are we making these choices? Why are we making the choices to exercise? Why are we making the choices to eat a particular food? Why are we making the choices to wear these clothes, or put this makeup on, or drive this car, or live in this suburb? Like, fundamentally, when you really get honest with yourself, what are the reasons for that? And I'm not insinuating that every single person does it for how other people perceive them. Not at all. I'm not saying that every single person does it for ego. What I'm saying is there is a part of us that is perpetually unhappy with who we are. And I really believe that based on what I see in people's low self-worth, their value of self, their belief of self, the way they treat themselves and talk to themselves. For so many years, man, the way I spoke to myself internally, man, if anyone spoke to me like that, I mean, back in the day, I'd be punching on, I'd be really aggressive and angry about that. I would never speak to anyone like that today. But in my head, I was speaking to myself in that way, really nasty. Telling myself I wasn't good enough. If I made a mistake or maybe I spilt this, I'd call myself a fucking idiot, but with nastiness in my tone, in my inner tone. And all of that was learnt behavior. For me, if I peel all that back, it was expectations that were put onto me and the way I interpreted my life and environment, the way I interpreted the way my father, particularly my father, but my primary caregivers gave me love and saw me and what I needed to do in order to be loved. Now I'm going into psychodynamics here a lot, and that's not the be all and end all. I definitely don't want to make it that psychodynamics is the be all and end all of our humanity. It's not. It's a part of who we are. And based on what we've experienced the last couple of 100 years in terms of our accelerated growth, social growth and technological growth and even relationship growth, the way we bond and connect and globalization, the way we meet each other and so forth, the mind and the way we see ourselves plays a big role in how we behave and why we behave. So when we come back to this self-love, I don't think many people love themselves. And those that do either have done a deep amount of work to get to authentic self-love, or they think they love themselves and they don't. Because when we start nitpicking at everything that we are, or even parts of ourselves, we have to ask the question, why? What does that actually mean?
Totally. Well put. I've had quite a few clients that have come to the honest realization that they're scared to give up their neurotic self-hatred and anxieties in fear that they won't know how to be motivated to get up and do what they do, get up and compete, get up and go to work. They've literally come to that realization like, holy shit, they've been able to see it exactly like how you put it, seeing it clearly for what it is, like a meditative moment of clarity, seeing it, witnessing it, and then being honest, like, fuck, I don't know if I'm ready to let it go. I don't know if I've got what it takes to do what I do 8 hours a day plus without that anxiety, without that self-hatred, without that insecurity that has me needing to one-up everyone, needing to compete over excessively. So it's an interesting game to really check out with full honesty. Like, can we do what we do from that place of self-love, which we can, but for most of us, it's a huge leap into completely new territory. Because that, when we're truly like in love, in a state of love, we're also then loving that person next to us and then loving everyone.
Everything.
Yeah. So how, if we're in like a dog-eat-dog, I don't know, corporate environment or something like that, for many, that is inconceivable how they can go into that game loving themselves, loving everyone, just oozing compassion. It's totally possible. And what a beautiful transmission for paving the way for the future and harmony and how we treat the earth. Even how we treat the earth is a reflection of how we treat ourselves collectively, that kind of inner self-hatred. And then of course we're going to hate on the earth and just bulldoze it and burn it and kill it, because that's what we're doing to ourselves collectively. So it's huge to like really sit with that and work with it. And self-love is big. It's a big energy. And may we really get honest with that. May we like hear these words and these sharings and like really dive into it. Because when we're truly in self-love, that's where true confidence comes from.
Yes.
We're in ease and we're in confidence, and then we can go out and rock it and not be so fucking preoccupied with what everyone else thinks and all those games that come with feeling insecure, you know? So it's big.
Man, confidence, you touched on confidence there. Confidence is something that we all want. Confidence is something that we all think about. Confidence is something that we all crave. And ultimately, confidence comes from a clearing of self, a clearing within self. And when we're on point with our belief systems around who we are, just our self-belief, around ourselves, around our own capacities and capabilities, around our own truth, when we value who we are and what we bring to the world, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with comparison. It's, again, why we compare and how we compare. If we excessively compare to the point where our sole purpose is just to simply be better than someone else without actually gaining any wisdom or traction, substance through that process, then it's a lost cause. If our comparison is, if how we compare is at our own detriment, and it makes us see ourselves from a place of fear, scarcity, or deficit, that's not healthy either. So comparison's not the issue, it's how and why. And so we can actually leverage comparison. I can look at you and I can say, wow, man, I'm so impressed and inspired by your lifestyle. And I'm comparing, right? But that's very different to saying, Stuart, can't believe what he's got. He's not that good. Why has he got all that? Why is he's got this great family? Can you see the difference is massive, man. And so I can look at that and say, man, tell me more about how did you get to where you are? You know, you've got your beautiful home, beautiful family. Tell me more about that love that you share. Tell me more about your career. Tell me more about man, I want to, what are some of maybe the tools and techniques, but beyond that, the mindset or some of the hardships you went. But that's a very different conversation to me hating on you and then wanting to be better than you because of egoic reasons. Because that fuel is different. The fuel is fear and scarcity and anger and repressed stuff and unresolved issues. Whereas the other fuel is basically inspiration and growth, expansion, love, right? Freedom. Very different fuels, man, very different fuels. And honestly, I get sometimes caught in that social media trap of comparison where the fuel's not healthy. I look at people and I think, and this is hard to admit, man. I mean, this is really honestly hard to take ownership of. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. I look at people and I think, man, you don't deserve the amount of fame that you have. You don't deserve, when I look at you and I look at your content, I look at what you're producing, you don't deserve that. But that's me coming from ego and bullshit fear. That's me coming from a place of over-comparison and coming from a place of unhealthy comparison and focusing on other people because I'm not prepared to take responsibility for what I need to do to keep refining myself and expanding myself because I've hit a growth edge. Let's be real. That's the truth of it. So it's easier to project upon someone else than it is to take responsibility and ownership in that moment and say, you know what? I'm at a growth edge right now. I'm struggling because that's difficult to admit that in and of itself. And man, hey, I'm struggling. Any human being in today's world, if you're struggling, you're sort of weak, and weakness isn't perceived as a strong value. And fair enough, I get that. But there's ways to support each other through that as well, right? In a more evolved, conscious society. But that projection, that's where it comes from, man. And, I get caught in that trap often. Last week when I was going through my muck, when it rains, it pours, right? That was part of what I was going through as well. And I was looking at other people in the space that I occupy, and I was thinking, fuck you. Why does it seem so easy? Again, assumptions as well, not just projections, but assumptions. Why does it seem so easy for you? And then I fall into the victim state, another old pattern, childhood pattern of mine, because I'm going to be very clear here. For me, the victim state mentality was a protective defense mechanism so my father wouldn't beat the shit out of me. Because if I went up to him playing the victim, it made him feel more guilty for beating me, so the chances of him beating me or abusing me or being volatile with me were lessened. And so that you can see how that survival pattern becomes very, very easy to fall back into, right, as a kid. As a teenager, I used it in the opposite way where I became very hyper-aggressive in the world. And that's another story. But those patterns can come back really quickly. And so if we don't go in, right, this is what I'm talking about, manning in, this is all it is. If we don't go in and pay attention to that, and hey, let me tell you something, all these revelations and realizations didn't come overnight for me. They came with being in solitude. They came with being persistent in doing the work in terms of going deep within myself. It came from reaching out and asking for help. It came from researching. It came from sitting in stillness and silence. Call it meditation, call it whatever you like, prayer, whatever. It came with difficulty, But when it came, man, it was liberating. And we can have these conversations now, and I can be really honest with it and not be massively charged and not feel super shame about it either and guilt, because I've been through that. I've already gone through those layers. So now we can have this conversation, we can share, and we can learn together, right? Does that make me less of a man? I wouldn't think so. I would hope not. I'm doubtful. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that would think I am, but I don't know what that means. But, so we have an opportunity to really grow beyond our normality and beyond what we're really comfortable with. And in order to do that, we just naturally have to step into discomfort.
Yeah, that's huge. To voluntarily step into discomfort is very new territory for many.
It is.
To intentionally get uncomfortable. And we've touched upon ancient practices and tribes and whatnot in which that rite of passage and that intentional stepping into discomfort is a part of their culture. Like we were in Mexico not long ago, and the sweat lodge, that's a part of their culture. You get in there and you intentionally get uncomfortable, get hot,
you
and face down. Your shit.
You just sit up for 12 hours all during the night while you're man, it's pain.
Another thing is like the walkabout, intentionally going out on your own in solitude, in the heat, and just roam and face your shit, face your demons, face it all. A lot of people are doing the cold plunge now. I do it myself as well most mornings, and it's a great practice. I love it. That's often a part of my meditation. Just sit in that cold for 8 to 10 minutes and watch all of the reactions. Watch it all come up. And it's one of the many ways to intentionally get uncomfortable and learn to be with the discomfort of feeling ashamed, feeling judgmental, feeling angry, and being able to have space around it. But for most of us, it takes really diligent training, like regular practice, meditation practice, these sweat lodges, cold plunge, whatever it may be, going to these men's courses, as well for the women too. But it seems we're directing a lot of this at men, and yeah, it's so easy in our nervous system, in our primal nervous system, to default back to that reactive, divided, over-competitive way. We've been doing it for so long. It's a survival mode, and it makes sense. And when I'm in it, just reflecting on like it happens every now and then. And similar to what you shared, the social media thing. Like if I'm feeling shit, if I'm feeling fatigued, feeling flat, that's a trap for it. It's so sticky. It just sucks me right in. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a rule of thumb. Like if I'm feeling like that, if I'm feeling shit, if I'm feeling down on myself, feeling projective or all of that.
No social
media. But that's a discipline.
Yeah.
Because it's so sticky. It's so seductive to go on it for that. Even that rush of cortisol when I am feeling judgmental, even that is weirdly seductive to like distract me from my crappy feeling and just project it on someone else. Like it's weirdly seductive and chronically distracting. So I've got a bit of an austerity, a bit of a discipline. If I'm feeling crap, just don't hop on social media. Doesn't always work though. Don't always do it. No. But I try to install it, and it's effective. I always feel better if I just don't pick up the fucking phone. Just don't scroll through that shit.
Yeah.
And I think these types of disciplines are really going to be necessary for people's well-being as it continues to get more and more elaborate and subtle and multi-dimensional and 3D and like real. It's just mind-blowing where the social media and phone thing is going. The what is it? Virtual reality. It's getting more and more real. Yeah. And studies are showing that what we're seeing through the phone, as that gets more and more like virtually real, there's just no difference.
Yeah, the distinction is blurred, man.
Yeah, the distinction's getting blurred.
With our senses.
So it's now we need to really exercise those those disciplines and discernments, especially as it all gets more and more detailed and elaborate and real, you know?
Big fan of discipline and discernment, and that's part of delaying short-term gratification as well. That's part of that process because we live in a world where everything is just so easy. We're in massively peaceful times. We're technologically advanced more than we ever have been, at least. There's just so much of that we have to be discerning. We go back to intentionally creating challenge in our lives. You know, once upon a time, not that long ago, challenge was in our environment. Our environment was very dangerous. We were challenged naturally, and we grew that way. And because it was so dangerous, many of us didn't survive that long, really. We had a very short lifespan, 20, 30, 40 years maximum, if that. Now we have, in order to really challenge ourselves because challenge for growth is really the domain of the masculine. And so when the masculine enters that purposefully and intentionally, I think that's worth more in today's age, especially when it's done mindfully and with awareness. And so that's more difficult though, because it's not forced upon us or we have to react or respond, but we actually choose to now do that. And in a world of ease, in a world of simplicity or oversimplicity, or the attempt of that, the culture, at least the mentality is that's very challenging. And the reward is far deeper and greater as well.
Yeah, healthy restrainment, that discipline to restrain, very necessary. Steph, I'd love to just pull back and get to know you a little bit more, to be honest.
Yeah, man.
Can you share of your journey? Because we're kind of just getting to know each other as well.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share of your journey to myself and the listeners, of course, of what brought you to studying the mind and sharing these wisdom teachings and these experiences. What initially bubbled up in you? And just please share of your journey to where you're at now, from as far back as you feel like sharing. When did you start to feel this all bubbling up in you?
From a very young age, you know, Dr. John DeMartini often says that our voids can become our greatest values. And so for me, one of my greatest values is connection and communication, and also being able to be seen and see others. And so as a kid, though, I felt very isolated, very alone, not seen, not understood, like I didn't belong. I felt very disconnected from my family, disconnected from myself. I had to wear many masks. I thought I did, to protect myself. I grew up in a violent, aberrant family, dynamic, very emotionally abusive, volatile. So one moment, there was more moments than not, but one moment it would be danger and violence and just yuckiness and beatings and volatility and screaming and chaos. And the next moment it was love. And that was very confusing. And so I withdrew a great deal from the world. And, you know, just fast forward for a moment, like today, I'm really committed to being in the world and teaching and learning and giving whatever gifts I have, and also being surrounded by amazing human beings that I can grow from and then pass on to other people as well. And that passivity as a child, though, it hurt a lot, and wearing all those masks, I just became very confused with who I was. And as an early adolescence, I never had, you know, it was interesting. I was having this conversation today with a few friends, a few men that are in my life, and I said I feel very lucky, very blessed that I get to see, you know, you included, by the way, just from what I see on social media, how I see you show up, and just being in your physical presence as well. But I get to learn from all amazing fathers. You know, I hear kids speaking to their father about, boys particularly, but you know, or girls as well, just speaking to and I say father because obviously I'm a man, so I'd be a father, but speaking to their father about anything and everything. I couldn't speak to my father about anything. Like he wasn't available, either physically or emotionally, couldn't communicate, got hyper frustrated, was always agitated and projected that. Like we didn't, my brother and I didn't have that capacity. We had to learn ourselves. Now, not a bad thing, not a good thing, just is. But I see that, and I see these amazing examples of fathers. And I just think, wow, I feel so blessed because I can take all of this. And so, even when I have children, which I plan to have children, I'm going to be a really good dad, and I've learned from my father as well, many things. Largely what not to do, but nevertheless, it's still deep learning and deep teaching, right? But I want to go back to when I was a teenager. And so as I segued there for a moment, I was so withdrawn and so repressed that I became very angry and frustrated, and I just imploded. And I became very aggressive as a teenager and a young adult, very angry, fighting all the time. I became, my upbringing, violent, aberrant, short-tempered, until essentially that all unraveled itself. I was in a relationship and I was unfaithful in that relationship. I was disrespectful, not trustworthy. I was just lying in that relationship excessively, lying to myself, lying to her, lying, man. And to watch the pain in her face and to see that I'd hurt someone that I really genuinely cared for was very difficult. And that was a turning point for me a number of years ago. And that really, I had two choices: continue the way I was going and completely corrupt my system and be ignorant to what I'm doing. And, I was experiencing volatility in every area of my life, in my businesses, not so much my health. My health was fairly stable, or always has been actually, which I've been very thankful for. But, in all my relationships and my ventures and my ideas and my purpose and just what I wanted to create and be in the world, all make some serious changes, some really serious changes. And I chose the latter, and I went into that, and I committed I gave up businesses. I went into debt because I survived on credit cards. I was cleaning toilets to survive. I was doing whatever I needed to do, but I was spending time in deep solitude. I sought help, spiritual healers, counselors, guides, psychologists, immersive experiences, shamanic healing. I went towards neuroempowerment, neuroscience. I did anything and everything, man. And I spent a lot of time on myself, a lot of time with me, in deeper meditations and just coming face to face with all the repressed stuff, the shame and the guilt and the pains and the fears and the forgiveness that needed to take place and all the wounding and all of that stuff, and spent years in that space. And where I am today is very free and open. Where I am today is very connected to who I am. Where I am today is very clear, very clear. I'm about to marry the most amazing human being. I mean, to attract that level of beauty in my life at all levels, I can sit here, I'm sitting at the moment, but sit here really proud with verticality and say, well, I have done that work. I've traversed hell and back multiple times. I've hit rock bottom, and I've had my face dragged across that jagged edge, those jagged edges, my face and my balls. Literally my sexuality. Just because so much of it was around how was I behaving sexually, how was I behaving relationally, like just dragged across those jagged edges of that rock bottom, and completely rebuild myself. And not many of us get those opportunities. Not many of us go down that path. And I'm very blessed that I did. And I feel where we are collectively as a humanity, as a consciousness, as a collective consciousness, we, fortunately or unfortunately, we need to learn through extremes. That's where we are as a collective. I feel that's changing. And I feel the more of us go through those extremes, we realize that the pendulum doesn't have to keep swinging in extremes, and we can find a greater harmony. And I feel blessed enough that's where I am at the moment. So when I'm dealing with difficulties, very different to how it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago. The level of awareness that I have is far greater. And, surprisingly, I just unpack more levels of awareness because I'm willing to, I want to. But I had to make that initial decision. And I really want to stress that whilst I spent a lot of time on my own, I had a lot of support as well. And man, I was on suicide watch, for myself.
What age would have that been when you were on suicide watch? What age do you think you were?
Oh, for me, man, I went through a very dark period before my 20s, very dark period. I went through a very dark period when I was 28, but
kind of Saturn return
type
thing.
Yeah, 28, 29, 30. The darkest for me was around 30, 31, 32, 33. There was a bit of reprieve there. I'm 37 now, and then 30, 34, 35 was very, very dark as well. Where I was legitimately contemplating. I was losing my mind, man. I mean, I was losing all the layers of self, the way I identified with the world, all the layers of self-identity. And so there was just a heavy period there. And even last year, even though I'd moved through so much of the old stuff, last year I purposely took on some psychosomatics. It was a journey. It was about a 3-month journey with a couple in San Diego. It was very liberating, but man, during it was heavy. And I was with Christine at that time, and so but it was just, again, a lot of changes in my life, but it was beautiful. But I purposely thought, I feel this intuitively, this is the next level of my evolution. Now, I didn't contemplate suicide then, but it's just very, very dark times. But yeah, there were a few sketchy times in my life, in my early 30s, largely early 30s, where, man, it was scary, super scary.
Thank you for sharing, man. Yeah, and once again, lots of gems in there for people to reflect upon, even the darkness and all the way to suicide, contemplating our suicide. When we can be honest with that as well, just like being honest with our anger and being honest with all of our shit. If we're truly feeling suicidal, not only should we reach out for support like you did, but even spiritually dive into that desire just to end it.
Yeah,
that desire just to end our suffering. Like most spiritual practices, mystical practices really have maps and ways to really dive into that. We're impermanent physical creatures. It's going to die. There's this karmic unfoldment. We've got all this karma that we're working with. You could end it now, but you're just going to be fucking faced with it next round. So why not die before you die?
Went through all of that, bro.
Spiritually die. The hero's journey.
Yeah.
Let it all fucking die. You could kind of like spiritually commit suicide, that kind of.
I did that.
That's what Shavasana is. All these yogis doing Shavasana for 5 minutes at the end of the class. Shavasana is meant to be that. Die before you die. And then you come into child's pose and you come into fetal position and sitting up, reborn. That's what it's meant to be in a yoga class. Like die again and again. And it's kind of like a suicide. Letting it all go again and again, letting it all go again and again. It's fucking scary. Scary to constantly spiritually die before we actually die. And then we sit up and it's all a bit unknown, but it is unknown anyway. That's clarity, stepping into the unknown, that kind of beginner's mind. So yeah, I think it's a really sensitive subject for people, especially in our culture, just the conversation of death and impermanence. Most people don't want to go there. Well, a lot of people don't want to go there. I know even people really going deep into their sadhana don't want to talk about death, don't want to go there. And it's a common one that ties into all the other cloaks of denial and misperception and just kind of hiding in those blind spots that keep us from being really present. The death thing is huge. And I know a lot of teachers kind of emerging in the community and a lot of people going really deep in their kind of mid-20s and just a bit of and flying high, like really full of vitality and really just rocking it and empowered and in a groove, in a really flowing groove. And possibly just a little bit of wise discernment that there seems to be a pattern after that mid-20s, kind of late 20s into mid-30s, like you shared, where that kind of next movement, that next level of growth and development comes into play. That it could be called Saturn return or whatever we want to call it. It's real. It happens for most people where it gets challenging again to just keep a level of wise discernment, because when that next level of challenge comes up, often people become attached to how they were. Like, fuck, I thought I had it all together and I was flowing and I was feeling confident and I was radiant and look at me, I look so beautiful. And then all of a sudden I'm fucking deep in it again and I'm suicidal, dark night of the soul and whatnot. That's normal. It's normal for our growth and development. We might have taken multiple steps forward and then all of a sudden multiple steps back. That's fine. We do that from birth, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, et cetera, et cetera. If we're truly at the cutting edge of our growth and development, that's going to keep happening, whether quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, 3/4 life crisis. And with these tools and the Sangha and the honesty and support, we can really face all that shit and let it open us up, even that feeling of suicide that I think most people, I know I've felt that, mainly in my teens, and that was one of my first awakenings when I really, it was associated with a drug overdose, a near drug overdose. And I just felt like I was going to die for months in recovery and just thought about pulling the pin time and time again. I was like, fuck, this is just dark and shit. And that was a huge awakening. I'm really thankful that I didn't kill myself, but in a way it was a kind of spiritual death. It was such a dark, intense period that then something beautiful emerged. And literally when I did emerge, people didn't recognize me. People didn't recognize me. Like there was a full, like you could even say cellular, but mainly like a karmic, subtle, metaphysical transformation, But we gotta, often it's involuntary. Often we don't have a choice. But also I think equally often we do have to make a choice to, again, like we keep touching upon, put ourselves in those challenging situations and face it all,
Yeah. Yeah, man, there's so much power in facing just our stuff, who we are, who we want to be, who we're not, and who we're attempting to come into. I think there's a lot of power in that. And we negate that because it's difficult. But difficult doesn't have to mean impossible, and it doesn't always have to mean yuckiness. It doesn't always have to mean drudgery and mud and muck, and it just doesn't. It really doesn't. So, we have an opportunity to embrace those cycles and, again, radical self-acceptance and radical acceptance of this is a part of life. You spoke a lot to essentially what you spoke to was the art of dying. For me is what the art of dying is having those conversations. I know in my life right now I've felt love like I've never felt before, for my beloved, for myself, for my service in humanity, for, who and what I come into contact with. And I'm also shedding a lot of layers around, judgment and anger and aggression and guilt and entrenched stuff. There's still layers there. And as I come into this newer version of myself and I've loved like I've never loved before, I'm also realizing, I'm saying to myself, there's a practice of release and detachment here as well, because I just don't want to be that person that puts everything into something and then that something is, quote unquote, taken away from me and then I crumble and have no foundation. And so for me, I need to die before I die. I need to for me, and I believe this is very transparent for all of humanity, but I want to speak for myself that for me, my next level of evolution, and this isn't a few weeks or this isn't a 6-week course or anything, this is a lifetime practice, is to love deeper than what I love now and with less attachment, with less apprehension, with less tension, with less fear. And that's a deep practice, and that is the art of dying before dying. Whether it be physical death, whether it be an emotional death, whether it be a relationship death, whatever it may be, is to be adaptable and robust and prepared to, okay, I'm no longer serving in this way. This is the new direction. Can I be at peace with that? This is genuinely where I need to go right now. Can I be at peace with that? Can I let go of the identities that I've attached to my actions for so many years? Can I let go of what I've created in the world and given to the world? Can I take a new path if need be? Can I just let it go seamlessly, be grateful, be thankful, appreciative, accepting, and step into, with clarity, prowess, and grace, the new version of me? Well, usually struggle a great deal to step into any new version of self because we're so not because the new version of self is ugly or not nice, but because we're so attached and entrenched in the past. So for me, my personal practice, something I'm very aware of and have been really since I met Christine, since I felt this profound giving and receiving, learning to receive at even deeper levels, I started feeling about, oh, this is interesting, because with this great love comes great responsibility and the potential for great pain. Let me go deeper into this.
Oh, man, I hear you. Wait till you have kids as well. That just takes it
No
to
doubt.
another fucking deep level.
No doubt.
It's crazy. And I chew on that attachment thing a lot. I thought I had it down before I had kids, you know? And when I do these contemplative practices in regards to my kids and non-attachment, this love without non-attachment, it's a fucking tricky one.
Yeah,
It's
no
a
doubt.
real tricky one. And I'm very attached. And for me, it's a mystery as to if that is actually possible, to be a good parent and be non-attached. Because you look at these leaders that have laid down the teachings, even the great Buddha, he left his family to attain enlightenment. And he had a vision to serve the collective, the world, and deliver these Dharma teachings and so much. But he did leave his kid and his wife, you know, and it's like there was obviously a kind of detachment. I don't know if his heart broke him, who knows? But it's different to what I'm experiencing. So it's interesting just laying down those teachings that I value so deeply of non-attachment, of unconditional love. Yeah, fuck it. It's a tricky one. If I'm really going to dive deep into it and apply it to my kids,
it's not easy. Yeah, I mean,
it's a lifetime.
Apply it to yourself, to life, and by no means am I saying that it's easy. And like I said, it's a lifetime practice. And again, it's this finding this balance of loving even deeper and more profound with more attention and more presence, especially for men, more vertical presence and clarity and discernment in how we act and how we see and I was just going to come back to that word presence, yet not attached to an outcome of how we are given love by the outside world, or how we are revered by the outside world or not revered, and not being attached to the physical body is what we place so much emphasis in the physical body, man. Okay. I'm the first to say it's just interesting. I've spent so many years in health and wellness, in physical health and wellness, emotional, psychological, spiritual, as I am more so now than for the physical wellness. It's more of a personal, private practice. But I used to teach that a great deal in my previous service, in my previous careers, and I would teach so much of that and be in that industry. Yet I was so metaphysical in my beliefs. I was so transcendent of the physical body, thinking myself, the physical has no place. It's a weakness. It's all about spirituality and the non-material and the immaterial. And I've definitely changed my views since then. But it's still being in the world and of the world, yet not being completely determined by the world. And that's fucking tough. But you know what? I'm also having fun exploring that. I really am. And I'm sure it will be a different story once I have children. But irrespective, it's something that I really want to continue to practice with great depth and clarity.
You mentioned the word robust in association with love, which I really want to re-emphasize, because I think there is an ingrained fear, possibly especially in men, that if I'm going to fully be love, I'm going to be excessively vulnerable. I'm going to be overexposed, overly open. I might get my back stabbed. I might have my guard down. Yet, from my own experience and from what I study, when I'm really in that state of love and devotion and presence, there is a robustness to it. There's a vitality to it and a resilience and a flexibility to it that is so much stronger than any egoic kind of false armor or guard or persona type divide that we put up. Yeah, this deep love is very strong. It's very robust. Yet it does require that huge, huge leap. Maharaji up here, that was his main teaching. He didn't have many formalized teachings. It was all about love everyone and tell the truth. I mean, that's a lifetime of practice, lifetimes. And Ram Dass often reflects on that. Like, he's still practicing that. If he's going to be really honest, he's still practicing. I'm still practicing to love everyone and tell the truth. That's it. That was pretty much the teaching. And disciples would be coming up to Maharaji like, come on, give me the method. And he'd be like, go out and feed everyone. Go out and serve everyone. Go and love everyone. Tell the truth. And that was his whole thing, this path of karma yoga, of action, of bringing it from within to without, and really giving that love unconditionally. And he was renowned for that. Not for many formal teachings, but just this love, this deep, deep love, which is so impactful, so strong, you know.
Yeah, I hear that, man. I hear that. That's another practice in and of itself as well. That devotional love, you know, or you could mention karma yoga, but also the bhakti yoga, the devotion. Just that in and of itself, devotion, unwavered devotion. So it's not conditional devotion. It's unwavered, unconditional devotion. I mean, that's another practice in and of itself.
Yeah, Ram Dass shares this story of a Zen monk, and the Chinese were coming into Tibet, literally gutting everyone with machetes. And one of the men with a knife walked up to this monk, like, don't you know who I am? What I could do with this knife? I'm about to gut you. And this monk just stared at him in the eyes lovingly, just unconditional love, and just said back to him, don't you know who I am? And the guy just broke down in tears, dropped the knife, and apparently didn't gut him. And that was a huge part in breaking the back of the Chinese invading Tibet, that power of love, even when we're about to get our fucking guts slashed. There's another story of Gandhi, as he got assassinated, and he's doing his devotional practice, just chanting Ram, 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 God, God, God. That was his practice, mainly just chanting as he served the world. And apparently, even as that bullet entered his heart, and I talk about it a lot because it's a huge inspiration, he apparently uttered the words Ram, and even had a gentle smile on his face as he got shot. Even then, not like, fuck you, how dare you kill me? Like, even then he's loving.
Yeah, there you go. There's the non-attachment, right? There it is. I mean, that's the devotion to the practice. That's the realization, and the action of that. I mean, it's everything.
May we. Steph, it's been a delight. I want to respect your time. What's coming up? What's the near future laid out for you and the community? Have you got anything you want to mention to the listeners?
Yeah, man, there's so much going on. So Christine and I are teaching in London on the 6th of October, which is a one-day workshop. It's all about love. It's all about self-love, really, and moving through the sticking points in our lives so that we can expand our presence in love. And we're back in December here as well in Australia together. So we'll be teaching here on the West Coast and East Coast, which I'm very excited about. Reclaim Your Kingdom for me has already started, which is that online program for men. Men from all around the world get together. And then it's coming out again. I run a few of these every year in October. Also for you US listeners, I'm with Sacred Sons. So Sacred Sons are us, Sacred Sons. We are a men's group as well, a men's organization, really healing the planet, but helping men move through their stuff. And so we've got, just go on Sacred Sons website, you'll see there's a a deep men's program at the end of August in San Diego, which there's 4 facilitators. There's 4 of us, myself, Jason, Aubert, and Adam, and we're going to go deep with 20 men. So it's a 1-to-5 ratio. It's powerful. And then we have the convergence where there's good 100 to 200 men, 150 to 200 men in October as well. And we're going to do 2 back-to-back, 2 weekends back-to-back, and that's just on the border of San Diego and Mexico. So just very exciting things for this year, man. Super exciting. And just serving and growing in the interim.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm super inspired.
Thank you, brother.
You're a real inspiration. It's been an honor
Likewise.
and a joy to connect.
Thank
All
you,
the
brother,
best,
for having
fella.
me. Appreciate it.
Much love.